Okay, one thing I forgot to do the last time was record from the beginning, and I'm doing it now. So
Very good, very
there
good.
we go. And I don't know if you all can hear that surf. I'm going to stop it. There you go. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And first thing I will say is if you all can just mute your audio at this point. And use the chat function to let us know where you're logging in from. That would be great. Each meeting, we look to see where people are coming in from. It shows a very interesting picture. Of course, we have the core members. I call them the core members, but the local members in and around the Annapolis area, Annapolis nearby, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. And we've had people from as far away as Florida and as far north as I think we did have a couple of people come in from Maine. So it's kind of nice to see where people are coming in from. Also use the chat function to ask a question of the presenter. It will be monitored and we will answer those questions at the end of the presentation. Let's see. Here we go. Now we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. One of the things that unfortunately we still continue to do is crossing the bar ceremony to honor those that have passed on. We do not know specifically, unless we are notified of members that have gone on. But at this point, the pandemic is still claiming people. As of this morning, it was 675,000 Americans that have lost their lives to the COVID-19. I don't know how many of those are because of the Delta variants, which we'll talk about in a little bit. If somebody can mute their phone, mute their screen, please. How many have fallen victim to the Delta variant or the original COVID-19? But I do know that it's more right now. It has claimed more victims than the Spanish flu did back in, what was it, 1918? So this is nothing to play around with. Everybody has different beliefs. And as I said at the last meeting, I believe if you can, please get vaccinated, get all your shots. I'm waiting on getting, I haven't got my booster yet, but my wife and I have gotten both of our Pfizer shots and we will be getting our booster shots. We went up to New York last week. You have to use your vaccination card as well as a picture ID to get in almost any place up there, restaurants and the theater, which is opening back up, thankfully. But it's nothing to play around with, guys. So please do what's in your heart. And so again, to honor those, we will have the ceremony. Okay. What I would like to do is, I did a little bit of opening remarks, but I'll do it formally now. Welcome to the fall, everybody. We are now officially in the fall season. Some of us are still out there on the water. Some of us may be slowing down. I fall into those two categories. I think over the last 3 days, I've had 5 charters. I do charters. We had a Sunday, I had a post wedding reception party. I guess wedding reception after party, which was kind of nice. And a couple of what we call crab boats, all you can eat crabs. I had 3 or 4 of those over the last week. But it's slowing down. Between now and the end of October, I've only got 4 coming up. So hopefully everybody will continue to be busy for as long as the weather holds up. And Annie, I thought about you over the weekend. I saw Sea Dog, which is the Potomac Riverkeeper boat out of Chesapeake Beach. And I've never seen it up in DC before. So it's a beautiful, beautiful vessel. It's quite big. I've seen some of the other Riverkeeper boats and they were like very small, designed to get up inside small estuaries, but this one was quite big and it's quite nice looking. I will, Priscilla, do you want to give a few words about the survey that was sent out?
Yeah, just a quick word. We sent a survey about member interests to guide our future efforts in light of COVID and some other things. It was sent on the 24th of this month. We've gotten 83 completed responses. 176 of you looked at it, but 83 have responded as of a couple hours ago. We know who you are. Thank you very much. Please respond. It's important for us to guide our plans for both the November meeting and for what happens in the new year.
Okay, thank you, Priscilla. As before, for those of you who may not, since we aren't meeting in person, those of you that would like to put names with faces, of course, I'm Bill. I'm the president of the organization. Vicky, I don't see where you're on yet. Okay, Vicky's support is a vice president.
She was having trouble logging in.
Oh, she is? Okay.
Yeah. She's on her
Okay,
way.
hopefully she'll be in a little while. Priscilla's our secretary, who was just talking. Carl, Bart's our treasurer. Zach, I don't see Zach.
He's
on
in
yet.
Greece.
He may still be on travel, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's no excuse. You can log in from England or wherever he is. He's our Con Ed director. Rob Young, he's our jobs program. When you get those delivery jobs and so on, you can thank him for getting the stuff posted. Membership, Phil. Right, Phil, there he is with the beautiful helm there in the background. Dave Sire is our webmaster. He keeps us going, so you all know what's going on in terms of the jobs and other information, the log, and so on. So Dave is the wizard behind the green curtain that keeps everything moving there. At this point, Yvonne, who's our programs director, I am going to turn it over to you so you can then in turn introduce our speaker.
All right. Yes, we're very happy to welcome Annie Richards for our speaker tonight. And a little bit about Annie is she became the Chester Riverkeeper in January of 2021 as part of the Shore Rivers team. As Riverkeeper, Annie Richards is the primary voice for the Chester River and its tributaries, working through the science-based strategies of advocacy, enforcement, outreach, and water quality monitoring to achieve cleaner waterways. Riverkeepers regularly patrol their rivers and tributaries, advocate for strong clean water laws, engage with their communities, and serve as guardians for these living resources. Richards comes to Shore Rivers with a lifetime of experience on the Chester and local communities. For 10 years, she served as an educator, captain, and fundraiser at Eagle Hill Outdoor School. While there, she helped manage their fleet of historic Chesapeake Bay workboats and provided students of all ages with outdoor education centered on Chesapeake ecology and the unique resources found along the Chester. Annie Richards has also proven skills in nonprofit development, campaign management, and grant writing. All right, with that, we get to hear all the great specifics, and I'll turn it over to you, Annie.
Thanks so much. And thank you all for having me here tonight. It's a pleasure to talk with you. And I'm feeling a little jealous. I actually want to ask all of you what you do with your captain's licenses. I got mine in 2010 when I was in college and working for Echo Hill Outdoor School as an intern. And it just turned into a lifelong love of being out on the river, providing educational experiences for students of all ages. And this new job and capacity for me as Riverkeeper has allowed me to jump from education to advocacy. And it's a role I really treasure. So I'm thrilled to speak with you all about it tonight. And so I'm going to kind of give you a two-part talk. I'll start with my role as Chester Riverkeeper at Shore Rivers, and then I'll also go into a brief bit about my background and history and the jobs I had on various boats that brought me to where I am today. So let me just share my screen here without further ado. Okay, can everybody see that? Great.
Yes.
So I am the Chester Riverkeeper. My Riverkeeper title is actually afforded to me through Waterkeepers Alliance, which grew out of one Riverkeeper out of the Hudson River in the 70s. And is now grown to 350 waterkeepers worldwide. So you can think of it like a franchise. I have my title and my dominion through them, and what they require you to be a riverkeeper is to live in the watershed you serve, to work full time, to work on your own boat, and to have your own boat to traverse the river. And from there, you just need a nonprofit to house you, and that's where Shore Rivers comes in. Shore Rivers is the result of a merger of 3 legacy organizations, and they all merged together about 3.5 years ago. And that was Chester River Association, Sassafras River Association, and the Midshore Riverkeeper Conservancy. So when Shore Rivers was born, they brought 4 riverkeepers together, and we now have 23 full-time employees dedicated to river health. Our mission is to protect and restore Eastern Shore waterways through science-based advocacy, restoration, and education. We believe that diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice in our staff, board supporters, and programs is critical to achieving our mission of clean water. And we believe strongly that access to waterways fuels environmental stewardship. Inclusion of diverse communities is essential to long-term success, and diverse representation in our membership, staff, and board make us stronger. As you can see from this graphic on the screen, our core focus, our waterways are the Sassafras, the Chester, the Miles and Wye and Choptank, as well as Eastern Bay. And then we also have 3 regional offices across that landscape. So I had mentioned the mission is science-based advocacy, education, and restoration. So predominantly as the Riverkeeper, I live in the advocacy department, but our goal through advocacy and education is to put in the ground restoration projects that deal with runoff. So this is, just a very quick snapshot of all the types of land use that I could be dealing with around the Chester River, predominantly because 60% of the Delmarva is in agriculture. That is most of the land use that I am dealing with is agriculture and livestock runoff. So being able to work with farmers and to work with farmers the Farm Bureau and different special interest groups to help affect more positive farming for the bay and in turn for the Chester River is very important to me. I also work with residential communities that have outdated septic systems or perhaps HOA mandates that require them to have incredibly short lawns with tons of fertilizer. And then I also work with municipalities on the Eastern Shore. We have so many small historic towns that have very small tax base and a very small budget. And they were all designed in the 17 and 1800s and were designed to shoot water away from the town and into the river as quickly as possible, which isn't good for the river. So now we're trying to figure out how to retrofit those, old colonial designs so that we can be less impactful on the river. And then, of course, another thing that we're constantly trying to do as well is to tackle restoration projects in our rivers that can help deal with algal blooms, that can help deal with the sediment line that's unfortunately crushing our oyster and mussel population in the rivers and in the bay. So one of my key primary jobs is my water quality monitoring. This is something that I do from April through November. I test the Chester River once a week. I have 12 sites on the Chester, and every week I go out and I monitor these criteria out at each site. So temperature, pH, dissolved oxygen, salinity, nitrogen, phosphorus, turbidity or clarity, and presence of algae or chlorophyll A. And then bacteria is actually a special one. Bacteria, I have a suite of volunteers that help me monitor my bacteria levels, and they are actually completely different sites from my main stem monitoring sites. So here are my main stem sites. You can see across all 4 of our watersheds, we have a lot of data that we are collecting every single month. And this data helps us to create clear sub-watershed pictures of what the health is like in Southeast Creek or Langford Creek. What is it like in Rock Hall by Swan Creek? And we can that helps us target which landowners we can approach for restoration projects that can help boost the health of the water quality in that specific area. For bacteria, we monitor bacteria levels. And when I say bacteria, that can mean a lot of things, right? So there's lots of different talk about different bacteria in the bay. We do not monitor for Vibrio or any kind of flesh-eating disease or bacteria. We monitor for enterococci, which is essentially fecal matter. And this is a really exciting data point for us to gather, number one, because the main point of us gathering this is that so folks who are recreating in the water in the summertime when bacteria levels are most known to spike, they can check with us and find out if the water is safe for them to swim. This is all part of our Swimmable Shore Rivers campaign. But because it's fecal matter, that also means it's nutrients, and we can use that to trace where too much runoff is coming from the land, and it's another kind of signifier for us to figure out where we could best implement restoration practices, whether it's on a nearby farm, whether it's a malfunctioning septic system, whether it's a wastewater treatment plant that's malfunctioning, etc. So these are the 11 bacteria sites that I have. We test every Thursday for 15 weeks in the summer between Memorial Day and Labor Day. I have a team of volunteers assigned to each site, and they collect water samples, bring them to me within a 6-hour window, and we process them in our lab. And then within 24 hours, I have those results posted on social media and also on the swimguide.org, which is a great app and or website that I encourage all of you who are spending lots of time out on the Chesapeake to check out. It catalogs water testing data for hundreds, if not thousands, of public access areas all over the East Coast. And so you can go and check and see that weekend if a sample has been collected fairly recently and whether the water levels are safe to swim in. So another thing that I do as a Riverkeeper is I'm an advocate at all different levels, from the state all the way down to my neighbor. So during the legislative season, I came on in January, so I was right in the middle of legislative season. And as one of 4 Riverkeepers, we all spend a lot of time in the winter championing and testifying for bills that are circulating through various groups, and different coalitions that would benefit water quality on the Eastern Shore. So you can see the total list of bills here are every bill that we provided testimony for or spoke in front of the Senate or Congress about in favor of to get passed. And we actually had a really high rate of legislature passing this year. I think we had greater than 60% of the bills that we supported pass. And you can see bills championed in the Chester that I worked upon specifically is work group on public water access. This was really exciting. This one actually didn't get passed, but it's been couched for this year, so it'll be reopened this year. And this is to assemble a diverse group of stakeholders across the Chesapeake Bay that would come together and point out where in the Chesapeake we are significantly lacking public access sites and then how to go about implementing them. Urban tree plantings is a bill that was passed this year. This has opened up millions of dollars for trees to be planted in urban areas across the state of Maryland. This is huge, especially on the Eastern Shore, because we have so much agriculture. You can't have trees on an ag field. So one of the best places to add more trees to the land use on the Eastern Shore is to add them in towns and cities. This also does a great job in shading impervious surface, shading pavement, so that the pavement isn't getting too hot. When pavement gets super hot in the summer and you have a rushing amount of stormwater going across hot pavement, pavement then of course superheats the water, and then you have hot water shooting into our rivers, which is terrible for the food chain. It explodes oxygen levels and can be harmful to the grasses and different plants that are existing there, and can help contribute to dead zones for different species of fish. The Clean Water Commerce Act brought more funding for municipalities to upgrade their stormwater management and their wastewater treatment plants. And then HOA restricted low impact landscaping. This was when I was, that was the first bill I ever worked on. And this has just passed, and it restricts all HOAs in Maryland from imposing overly stringent lawn manicured laws. So if someone wanted to have a pollinator garden or a rain garden or a meadow in their yard, they should be allowed to do that, because that's a wonderful thing for whatever nearby tributary creek or stream might be coming by their lawn. So restoration, all of this data that I collect, all of the outreach that I do, whether that's at the state level, whether that's with a county, could be working with my currently both Kent and Queen Anne's counties, which are the counties that border the Chester River, are both going through zoning ordinance renewals and comprehensive plan revisions. So I work with them to consult more river-friendly language in their comprehensive plans, making sure that water quality is a key value in determining land use. But then I also can go out and visit anyone in the community that wants me to come out and help them understand what they can be doing to better the Chester River, or maybe they have a neighbor that is polluting and they want to know what the right thing to do about it is. So I'm a resource and an advocate at all levels. And then I'm also a person that will go and meet with those different stakeholders to try and convince them to do the right thing, to put in a restoration project. So you can see from this chart, we have, a huge amount of projects in the ground across our 4 watersheds. We are certified by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation as a technical service provider. We have an in-house engineer. We have staff with training in geospatial technologies and technical expertise to manage restoration projects. So Shore Rivers not only raises money and writes grants to fund huge restoration projects on farmland and in municipalities. And you can see on that chart, every red dot you see is a farmland project versus a yellow dot, which is a municipal project. And so not only can we fundraise to achieve these projects, but we also have the expertise to design them for the folks that want them. So one of these restoration projects that I've been working on specifically is we recently created a Chestertown comprehensive stormwater management plan. Chestertown, Maryland, if anyone has been, is a very historic, very old small town along the Chester River who has the exact stormwater management problems I detailed a little earlier in this slideshow, where all of the streets are designed to shed water as quickly as possible into the river. And we get that island effect of superheated water rushing toward our river. So this plan details over 30 individual green infrastructure projects that the town can implement to start dealing with this stormwater management issue, which is only getting worse in the face of climate change, which brings sea level rise, but also more increased, more frequent, and more extreme storms that can cause 100-year floods. So the overall goal of this plan is to establish more mature tree canopy through impervious surfaced areas, disrupt impervious surface and install green development projects. That's like this photo that you can see where it looks like a street. And instead of just a sidewalk next to the street, they've interrupted the impervious surface, created a concave garden that allows water to sink down into it. And they filled it with native plants that have deep reaching roots that can then treat and soak up that water before it runs downhill. We want to install bioswales and bioretention basins to absorb nuisance flooding. Again, bioretention areas is really just a fancy term for a rain garden. Again, a concave garden that has native plants. And we're also trying to focus efforts where we can extend the impact to underserved areas of our towns, which are usually in the lowest lying areas of our towns, and also have the greatest exposure risk. So another restoration project that I'm lucky to be a part of right now is we're currently doing a massive SAV restoration. SAV stands for Submerged Aquatic Vegetation. It's underwater bay grasses. And bay grasses have enormous benefit for water quality in the bay, but also for shoreline resiliency. So we received $75,000 from the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and that allowed us to partner with Washington College's Center for Environment and Society, CES. We also partnered with DNR and Anne Arundel Community College. What's special about this project is Anne Arundel Community College has been harvesting SAV for about 15 years and turbulating those grasses to collect their seeds so that they can plant them back out into the bay in more advantageous areas. This grant allowed us to pay Anne Arundel Community College to build us our own machine to do this and to teach us how to use it. So why would we do something like this? You know, these grasses provide incredible habitat because the Chester River and all the tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay are in very important nurseries for young fish, crabs, oysters, etc. And SAV is an intrinsic part of that habitat. They are an incredible carbon sink. I've been reading data that details an acre of fully fleshed SAV is more efficient at trapping carbon than that same acre of rainforest in South America. So it's incredibly efficient in trapping carbon. Shoreline resiliency, if you have 10 feet of this in a buffer along your shoreline, it's going to break up wave action. So in big storms, big floods, this is really going to do a lot to mitigate erosion issues. And of course, because they're plants, they are very adept at absorbing nutrients, which we obviously have too much of in the bay. And because they trap silt and allow the silt to sink, you get incredible water clarity. So this photo on, I hope it's on the left side for you all, that's called Redhead Grass. And, you know, I was paddling in Swan Creek by Rock Hall and scouting out this bed. And, you know, when I wasn't over top of it, it was a classic turbid, murky brown color. You couldn't see more than 3 inches down. And then all of a sudden I was over top of this bed and all of a sudden I can see 4 feet down in the water. In some areas I was seeing a sandy bottom with crabs and fish swimming around. And so when you find yourself on top of any of these SAV beds, you can truly get a glimpse of what we're trying to achieve on these rivers and in the bay. So our sustainable harvest looks like this, a bunch of bushel baskets and volunteers as we wade through SAV beds. Our goal is to only harvest from SAV beds that are larger than a football field, and we only harvest a third of the bed because we don't want to permanently damage that bed. We want it to sustain itself. Then we can go back and bring it back to the turbulator, collect seeds, and then go to another tributary on our river that perhaps doesn't have any SAV right now. So this was again Redhead, that same bed that I showed you before. And then we bring it to the turbulator. So you know, in this top left picture with the blue bins, what we do is we bring the SAV under a tent in these bins. We allow them to after ripen for about a week. And then once they've after ripened, we run them through essentially a glorified jacuzzi. It's that big white tank filled with water. And then this contraption of tubes and netting gets lowered down into the tub of water, and we hook up shop vacs to those 3 PVC pipes, put them on reverse cycle, and we blow air through it. And all of a sudden you have a jacuzzi that mimics wave action and current. And that separates the seed from the plants. And then we go through a refinement period, which is just hosing the seeds through various mesh boards until you get a clean, refined seed that you can then store over winter in aerated brackish jars in your refrigerator. And then next spring, we will go out with DNR and reseed in various areas. So this year was our first year that we've ever done it. And we were able to save seeds from 4 species and a total of over 14 million seeds. So we should be able to plant a 60 new acres of SAV in the spring because of that effort, which is really exciting. So we also do farm restoration, like I said, is really our biggest restoration arena. And that's because so much of the land on the Eastern Shore is farm. So we oftentimes are building mock wetlands for large dairy farms like this. You can see pictured, to build a poorly draining, to take a poorly draining area of farm and turn it into a high functioning wetland is a great way to store water runoff from dairies and from different animal farms so that the ground can just naturally soak up nutrient runoff before it heads off into an actual tributary. We also work with farmers to convert their traditional cropland into natural lands projects. So we work in tandem with Washington College frequently to have farmers install or to plant native grasses and wetlands. So we can gain back in the state of Maryland a huge amount of natural habitat that we've lost over the last 100 years. And this is hugely important for migratory songbirds, for predatory birds, and for many different pollinators, butterflies, and bees as well. But at the same time, these tall grasses with native deep roots help trap soil in place and help to mitigate that nutrient runoff from a neighboring farm. So it's incredible for biodiversity, but it's also incredible for river health and for the Chesapeake Bay. And that kind of, if you condense all of that knowledge of what's good on a farm and what's good practice in a town, you can condense that down into your own backyard and what you're practicing. So I have so many people that call me every day and say, I only own a 1/4 acre. What is it that I can possibly do that's going to help the Chester River? Well, everyone has rainwater that rushes across their lawn, no matter where they live. And the best thing they can do is slow it, sink it, and spread it. And the way you can do that is by letting your grass grow longer. To have really shortly shorn grass is doing nothing to slow down that flow of water. So to have buffer grasses, especially if you're a riparian homeowner, but then also, again, that rain garden, creating a concave area in your yard that can trap that rushing water so that water then can then sink down through the soil and then come into contact with those deep reaching native plant roots. I know I've said native plants several times in this presentation, and that's because native plants have evolved over, millennia for this particular type of soil that we have here on the Eastern Shore. And what we have is very, very long, deep roots as a result of that. So to show you here, you can see on the right, there's native plants, common 9-bark, black-eyed Susan, dropseed, buffalo grass, and you can see the difference in the depth of roots. So, every drop of water that's coming down through the soil column, it has that much higher of a chance of being filtered or absorbed by those native plants as it does by a daylily or fescue or spirea. So I also work with volunteers every single day. It's one of the best parts of my job. We have so many people in our watershed that care so much about the Chester River, and I understand why. It's an incredible body of water that I just keep coming back to. And so there's lots of ways to get involved at Shore Rivers. I have people helping me monitor bacteria levels. We have SAV monitors who kayak out to different grass beds and catalog the species that is there and the size and density of the bed so that we can turn it into a protected area for 5 years. We have Marylanders Grow Oysters, which are riparian homeowners who have docks that they can hang oyster cages off of their docks and grow oysters for 9 months. And then I can come and collect them and plant them in a sanctuary once they're, large enough size. And then we also have environmental education volunteers, master gardeners who are river friendly yards volunteers, and then administrative volunteers. So that's really my spiel about being the Chester Riverkeeper. It's an all-encompassing job. It keeps me going in a lot of different directions, which I really love. And the Chester River is incredibly special to me. It's where I grew up and it's where I came back to. But I also was very lucky to experience a lot of other waterways before I became the Chester Riverkeeper through different boat work. And so that kind of started at Echo Hill Outdoor School. So in 2008, I became an intern there and just absolutely fell in love with the programs they were running on the river. And I quickly studied up to get my license and ran trips for them for about 10 years, where we would take the Skipjack Ellsworth and the Byboat Annie D out on the Chester River for 5 days at a time. And we would crab and fish and swim and sail and navigate, explore marshes and beach lines. So it was a really amazing way for students, children predominantly of all ages, to disconnect from technology, immerse themselves out in the Chester River. We would eat when we were hungry, sail when it was windy, fish when the tide was right, go to sleep when it was dark. And the biggest thing that I took away from that experience is if you're not out on the water for long stretches of time, if you're not out there to see it, you're not going to notice what is happening out there. And there's so much life happening in this estuary that if you're not there to see it, you're going to miss it. In 2012, I actually, in the middle of my tenure at Echo Hill, in 2012, I took a little break and I got myself a job on this 65-foot aluminum catamaran. It was a charter catamaran owned by a husband and wife duo, and I was their mate. And together we sailed from the Chesapeake Bay through the Panama Canal to Panama City from November through March. And we had paying passengers come aboard for various legs of the expedition. So during that time, I was lucky enough to go to essentially every island in the Caribbean chain. I spent a lot of time in the British Virgin Islands, US Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico and Culebra and Vieques, but also, down the leewards and the windwards, a lot of time in Grenada, excuse me, and then as well as Colombia, the San Blas Islands, and eventually Panama. So that was an incredible experience. And then I was lucky enough to head to the Bahamas to work on a ship that was owned by a boarding school in Rhode Island, and I was able to work with them in a sea turtle tagging program with high school students. And then from there, I took a shipwrights internship on the tall ship Gazella in Philadelphia, where I learned a lot of traditional rigging and ship's carpentry. Although I never was able to sail with this boat underway. She was going through a lot of dry dock work. And so, but I loved the experience of doing all of the traditional rigging. This was definitely the most traditional boat that I worked on. I also was fortunate enough to work for a program called Action Quest, which charters a fleet of Benettos in the British Virgin Islands every summer and takes campers for a 3-week sailing camp experience where we circumnavigate the BVIs in 3 weeks. They learn how to sail the boat, navigate, and scuba dive. So I did that for 2 summers. And then I was eventually picked up by their, they were the parent company of another company called Seamaster, and this is Argo. Argo is one of 2 of their steel-hulled schooners, and Argo circumnavigates the world every 4 years, and college students come aboard for semesters. So I hopped on the boat in Thailand, and we went out to the Maldives and back. And then once we wrapped up that journey, which included Malaysia, Borneo, and then more parts of Thailand. We ended up living in Bangkok for about 6 months and going to work at the Thai Royal Navy Yard while the boat went through a major refit. So that was a huge experience as well. And the one thing that just stuck out to me through all of these different experiences was that water, while it's always been something that has called to me and has been a fulfilling part of my life, it was the keystone to whatever community that I was visiting. Their culture, their economics, their pastimes, their stories were all shaped by the body of water that they lived by. And I think that's true in the Chesapeake as well. And you know, I knew that story best of all. So when I got married and wanted to settle down, I knew I wanted to come back to this particular body of water and tributary that I know so well. So and there's a little shameless advertising of my son, Archie. So he's here with me on the Chester River. And, you know, in this new role as Riverkeeper, I just want him to have a clean river so that he can experience the same things that I got to. And that's my presentation. So if anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible, Annie. There's so many experiences you've had. I just wanted to go to our chat and tell you a couple of comments that have come through. It says from Chris Judy says, 3 cheers for Echo Hill. Worked with them some. Also kudos to Chester Riverkeeper. Thanks for all you do.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And then Philip Gauthier says, as the director of membership, I have a fiduciary responsibility to ask, why are you not a member of CAPCA?
That's a good question. Well, until Yvonne first reached out to me when I came aboard this new position, I didn't know about CAPCA. So I'm now fascinated to know about all of you, and I'm kind of dying to know what you all do and why you're in CAPCA.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, we have different backgrounds for sure. I might turn this over to Priscilla to answer that a little bit better. She's been around a bit longer. Priscilla, how would you answer that?
Join us and find out. We seem to have a wide range, everything from, we have a few Master of Oceans Unlimited, Navy or Coast Guard men and women that have a career there. We have a lot of people in the 100 to 200 ton, either inland or near shore.
Yep.
We've got a bunch of OUPVs, 25, 50 to 100 ton. So it's a wide range. Our people seem to do it in a variety of capacities, from deliveries to instruction, to yacht dealer instruction for new owners, to some of our members run charter tours for the public with their own vessels. So it's a wide range of interests.
Right. That's great.
Nothing as interesting as the Riverkeeper. This is fascinating, Annie. Really is.
I just want to make one comment. I want to be like you when I grow up.
Yeah. Don't we all?
I'm sitting with my mouth open. Great stuff.
Yeah. Vicky, did you have something? I see you got the hand signal there.
Yes. First, I'd like to thank you for a terrific presentation and all you're doing. I love the Chester River. It's one of my favorite places to sail.
Great.
I'm curious about Vibrio. So if you're saying it's safe to swim based on bacteria levels, how do we know about Vibrio levels, and should we be concerned about them?
So there are definitely times to be concerned about Vibrio. So it's first important to make sure that everyone knows, and I always say this, is I'm a citizen scientist. So I'm gathering this data, and I have a very specific realm of data that I feel comfortable and know how to gather. So there are other entities, state entities, that can speak to Vibrio in a more professional manner than I can. What I can tell you is that in open water swimming situations, the dilution of Vibrio bacteria is typically so great that even if it was in the water around you while you were swimming, you wouldn't be affected by it. Where it typically affects people greatly is anglers, fishermen. So a fish that has a lesion on it that has already been infected with Vibrio, you catch it, you touch it, and then a greater concentration is now in contact with your skin. That is a situation where you can be then impacted by that Vibrio at a much higher rate than, say, swimming in the channel, jumping off your boat, things like that. But that isn't to say that it doesn't exist along shorelines and that it isn't an issue. But it's just not something that we test for because there's not really a way to quantify it. We're collecting just a small sample of water, and it's so sparsely spread among, within a body of water that there's no way that we would really be able to accurately capture enough for it to show up. So it's just something that we stay away from. It's not to say that when we say it's safe to swim in the river, we're saying that our bacteria tests have come back below the EPA threshold for the amount of fecal bacteria in water, and that people can swim and not get sick from fecal matter, but it doesn't, it's not a blanket statement for all bacteria.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, I was just gonna, a couple more comments here. So Joan says, really interesting talk. Thanks so much. And then Lauren had a question, which I also had too, and that is talking about effective policy for cleaning the bay. Do you have any specific legislation? I know you had that great slide of all the House bills that are going through, but at the moment, if you had to choose one thing we could do to support legislation, what would you say?
Well, it depends if you're talking about the bay or a river. So I can tell you that in our rivers, the pollution is coming from our watershed. The Conowingo Dam is not really affecting us in the Chester River. Unless, when the floodgates just opened, we did get a nominal amount of debris that came in on flood tides in the lower half of the river, but it was a very, very small amount. And the water pollution and water quality that we're dealing with is a result of the land use directly within our subwatershed. The main Chesapeake Bay, however, I'd say the number one most catastrophic thing to the bay right now is the Conowingo Dam and the efforts needed to clean up behind the dam. And we're actually in the middle of a lawsuit right now. We're with Waterkeepers Chesapeake in a lawsuit with FERC to essentially undo the deal that they've just created with Exelon and for its cleanup and remediation strategies. At this time, whether we'll be successful, I don't know. I know that we are going to receive some nominal funding to help with cleanup efforts in the bay as opposed to above the dam in the Susquehanna, but it's not going to be very much. It's not going to be nearly what we need. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But Conowingo is a huge issue for the main stem of the Chesapeake Bay. And then, for us, I would say that in general, what anyone can do is, especially as boaters, so promoting proper boating practices around SAV. For those of you who might live near a tributary where there are a lot of underwater grasses, I know it can be a nuisance. It clogs your prop. And a lot of people will have, in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, were dredging those grasses away from their docks so that they wouldn't have to deal with it while they were boating. But those grasses are so essential to bay health, and it is truly one of those grassroots efforts that's going to make the difference. So as boaters, promoting good boating practices for people that have SAV nearby or that are boating through SAV, we don't want to be ripping up those SAV in our prop or dredging it up with our anchors. So that's definitely a big thing. And then other than that, it just every little bit helps, whether it's farming, whether it's trash pickups in your neighborhood, whether it's, encouraging farmers to transfer from conventional farming to no-till farming. It all adds up because it's a very diverse group of stakeholders across the Chesapeake Bay. And, there's millions of us. So anything that we can be doing is really does add up to a big impact.
Annie, I have a question.
Mhm.
Do you have any kind of literature, like a little brochure or something that would be useful to give to these recreational boaters at where they launch their boats, have racks available to promote. They are aware of grasses. They get in their props and they get mad.
Yeah.
But anything that would help people who are concerned about the grasses to just have a quick look at what they can do.
Well, we actually this summer had a campaign. A lot of local marinas in our areas displayed some big signs that we had made up.
Yeah.
That our slogan was for a healthy bay, let grasses stay. And I still have a bunch of those signs left over. So if you have marinas that would be interested in participating, I can get those signs to you. We still have
What about having them also reproduced in a small flyer card, just a simple little card?
Yeah, well, we have
Like a rack card.
we have bumper stickers and like window stickers that have the same thing as well. Yep, we have a bunch of those.
Okay.
Okay.
You get those. To you.
I have a couple of questions, Annie.
Yeah.
I know your area is primarily Eastern Shore. Am I correct?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I operate on the Potomac River, around in and around Washington, D.C. I get a lot of questions from people on my boat. Is it safe to swim here? Because they see a lot of people in the water. We have a lot of kayakers, stand-up paddle boarders, knee boarders, and so on, and jet skis all over the place around DC. And right after storms, particularly these last week when we had all that rain, water pouring over the Great Falls, Little Falls, the Potomac in DC looked like the color of coffee. Yet the water coming in from the Anacostia River, which people have in the past associated with being highly polluted, it seemed clear compared to the Potomac, where they met off of Haynes Point, East Potomac Park. Is there where can I get information about our particular area? Would it be the Potomac Riverkeeper?
So it would be the Potomac Riverkeeper. I also, for swimming, I encourage you to check out the swimguide.org. That's the website, theswimguide.org.
The swim guide?
Yep, I'll put it in the chat. Yep. And so the swim guide will detail, I would be willing to bet the swim guide has most of the public access points on the Potomac. And if someone is testing for water quality in those areas, the results will be posted on that website.
Okay, good.
So when people ask me if it's safe to swim, as much as I collect this data, I never tell someone if it's safe to swim or not. I know that what I can tell them is that the data that I've collected tells me that, it's within the safe thresholds mandated by the EPA, or it hasn't met the safe thresholds by the EPA.
Gotcha.
But my general rule of thumb is if we've had a heavy rain event, you shouldn't swim for 48 hours.
As we get complete debris fields floating like little islands in the river over here.
Yeah.
So we even have to be careful with our boats going through. I've seen logs the diameter of 55-gallon oil drums that have come over the falls.
Yeah.
Just floating by.
Oh, it's terrible. And, the same thing happens with the Conowingo, in the Sassafras, which is the only one of our rivers in our territory that really gets affected from the Conowingo. 16, 17 whole trees were floating around in the river the day after the gates opened. Refrigerators. Yeah. Jet skis, porta potties. It's terrible.
Wow.
Yeah. But I definitely just say the 48-hour rule is what I go by. Someone here says, John asked in the chat, does Kent Narrows create a problem for the Chester and Prospect for Eastern Bay, a unique waterway? So the Narrows, I would say Kent Island in general is an interesting animal because it's unincorporated, but it is so popular and so paved and has lost so much of its transitional marshland. There's none of this anymore because it's all become parking lot. And in fact, for those reasons, Queen Anne's County right now is going through a major process. Well, they're redoing their comprehensive plan right now, and it's become very obvious as I'm sitting in on these discussions that they're going to be required under a new stormwater permit, to treat 200 acres of impervious surface within Kent Island that they don't even own, because they gave it away to developers, and developers infilled that wetland. So now they have to figure out how to treat that.
Let's talk about the Four Seasons development.
Right, exactly.
350 units right on the river.
Right, exactly. So it's practices like that, because Queen Anne's County is going to be the first county in Maryland to meet its TMDL cap. So I don't know if you know what TMDL is, but it's the total maximum daily load. And that is the amount of nutrient pollution that a county is allowed to put into the bay. So every county has a cap of nitrogen and phosphorus that it's allowed to, emit into the bay every day. And Queen Anne's County is going to be the first to meet that cap.
Wow.
And because of that, they are faced with a situation where in this comprehensive plan update, they're going to have to put language that essentially halts all new development. They have no more sewer allocations to give out, no more wastewater treatment to give out, and they have to go back and treat all of this impervious surface that they've given away. So, it's in a time where we all need to be preparing for sea level rise and intense storm activity. The biggest protector of our land for increased storm activity is marshland. So if we don't have that wetland, then we don't have that ability for the shoreline to shift back and forth with various extreme storms. And then our, properties and our land isn't going to have that protection. So, this has been a very interesting time to become a riverkeeper. And I'm learning a lot as I go, because, this is all happening really fast for Queen Anne's County, where they were just going along thinking they were going to be able to buy their way out of it. And now all the rules have changed because they've met their cap. So definitely a learning lesson for other counties.
Annie, this is Hans. Can I ask the question?
Sure.
I have posted mine. That for some reason, I must not have clicked because I see them myself.
Okay.
But three things. It's terrific that you, toward the end of your wonderful presentation, showed some of your experiences. As a fellow sailor, of course, I'm great impressed that you worked with seamasters and cruisers and the waters that you have sailed. The reason why I mention that is it makes you a much more compelling advocate for what you're trying to do, because it's clear that you care and you have the background to make your point stick. That's my first. My second is I'm looking forward to your flyers that Priscilla asked you about. There are several stakeholders on the Chester River that I'm in contact with, and I will make sure that they get them. I'm also participating in my sailing school's Annapolis Boat Show activities. And if I have those on certain occasions, I'll be able to pass them along. My third question relates to the Chester River in particular. You have mentioned shellfish as a valuable resource, as we all know. My question is, the Chester River has a number of fish weirs. And do the fish weirs support your efforts? Because the fish weirs are a very, very, very old technology.
I'm so glad you asked this question. Yes, so pound nets. We on the Chester, at this point, when I was a kid on the Chester, we still had a significant amount of clamming activity, and as well as oyster tongers on the lower beds. All of that industry has gone away. We have a few crabbers who run trot lines, but really the only waterman activity we have on the Chester is one family called the Manning family. They have 3 boats at Quaker Neck Landing, and they own the permits to all 12 pound nets that are on the Chester River. And pound nets are an ancient means of fishing, if anyone is unfamiliar with how pound nets work. I am a huge fan of pound net fishing. That's another part of my job at Shore Rivers, and also when I worked for Echo Hill that I loved, is that part of what we think makes us successful is that we value every stakeholder on the bay, and we want to lift up every stakeholder that's doing the right thing for the bay. So we're not pro farmer, we're not pro waterman, we're not pro developer, we're pro river. And if there's a developer out there doing the right thing, we're going to lift them up. If there's a waterman out there doing the right thing, we're going to lift them up. And the Manning family is doing a great job. You know, I am lucky enough to be able, if I see them out on the water, I can go and check in with them and see what they're catching, because they're out there every single day catching huge amounts of fish, storing them in a live well, and then surveying them, essentially throwing out all their bycatch. They can tell me every species that's come into the Chester and what they're seeing more of. And it rained really hard last week and it pushed all of the mackerel down and they're not here anymore. You know, so I can collect a huge amount of anecdotal information from them, because they're one of the most constant eyes out on the Chester River, which I think is really valuable. And I think that pound net fishing is one of the best ways that we can encourage wild fishing to continue on the Chesapeake. And, you know, then in contrast, we have one oyster farmer on the Chester, which is Scott Budden. He owns Orchard Point Oysters. And, you know, that's an area where I want to lift up aquaculture, because when Scott first started his lease, he has bottom oysters and top lease oysters. And over the past 5 years, if he had, I wish we could go back in time and put a camera under his top lease and just do a time-lapse video, because it has gone from murky, coffee-colored Chester River to a literal orb of wonderful water quality, thriving grasses, huge spawns of rockfish, crabs. I mean, the life and diversity has come right back to that one little area. So the more successful kind of orbs of water quality we can achieve through floats of oysters in the river, it can be very controversial, because once you have those leases, then it's not available to watermen. But the benefits for me are just far outweigh the costs. And, you know, I'm actually working with Scott to develop a program where we can start putting oyster floats above sanctuaries, because the sanctuaries in the Chester River are underperforming, mostly because the silt line, the sediment line in the river, is too high. And when a mud slick goes over the top of an oyster bar, the baby oysters don't have a clean surface to strike on, and then they're never going to reproduce successfully. So then they perform less and less well every year. And the less they perform, the less the state funds them. And it's really important to fund low salinity oysters. So because we're so far north in the bay, low salinity oysters are the most disease resistant. So MSX and dermo, all of those catastrophic diseases that really knocked out the populations 30 years ago, don't affect oysters in the Chester River and in the Northern Bay, which is also where most of the sediment pollution is coming from the Conowingo. So this is definitely the type of research and oyster population and sustainability that we need to be endorsing at the state level and with more funding. So good
Thank
question. You got me on a rant, but good question.
It's okay, bravo.
That was a good rant.
Yeah.
I was going to ask a couple more questions. Do we have time, Bill?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on you guys.
The first one I had was anything with plastics, or is that sort of management there? I know you had trash pickups you'd mentioned, but did the Chester Rivers Keepers or any of the river keepers doing anything with plastic management? Or
yeah, every year we do a program called Project Clean Streams, which is actually a program through the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay that we participate in. We're one of the hub leaders. So between April and June, we get as many volunteers as possible to organize local trash pickups before the grasses and the bushes in the forest have really grown in and you can actually see the trash. So that's our big trash push every year. But because we don't do a lot of testing for microplastics or anything like that, you know, we of course encourage trash pickup and no littering. And you know, we have a very, you know, aspirational no single plastics use, you know, in our offices, but we don't do any major restoration pushes with plastics, simply because nitrogen and phosphorus and sediment is really just overtaking that in terms of the detrimental effects on our waterways. So that's where we focus.
Okay, and then my second question was, or is, what about marina management and clean marinas and supporting? It seems like in Maryland, it's going well. I see a number of marinas that have been labeled as clean marinas. What do you see about that program?
I have seen that grow more in the Kent Island area simply because those are a lot newer marinas and there's many more eyes on them to be doing the right thing because there is so little land to develop there. The older marinas, none of, and I'm just trying to think about, Langford Bay and Kinnersley and Chestertown, and, the Chestertown Marina was just redone recently through grant programs. None of them, I think, are specifically designated clean marinas. But we, do all of our marinas have pump out stations. More interestingly, the Chester River is, has been officially designated a no discharge zone, above many of the other tributaries in the Chesapeake. So we have kind of like a higher, designation through DNR than a lot of the other tributaries in the Chesapeake for discharge. And so even, marinas or cruise ships that have treated waste on board, they cannot discharge even treated waste in the Chester River and things like that.
Okay, so the biggest impact with marinas sounds like is with waste and holding tanks and okay.
Definitely.
And I guess there's a lot of little things we can do is in terms of like no cigarette butts, because those are plastic, and encouraging marinas to do buffer zones. And what do you think? And then I know you can get the baskets of oysters, so you can do your own oyster gardening at your slip, like all those little things.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So you don't have to be a riparian homeowner with a dock. You can have a boat that you live at in a slip. And if you're in the right salinity regime, we can give you those oyster cages to hang off your boat or your boat slip just as easily as we could give it to a homeowner. So that's definitely something that is available. I think that, just a lot of the, I think a lot of us do our own work to our boats as we're maintaining and sanding and painting. And it's easy for, us all to have the marina put us where they're going to put us and say, well, this is where we've been put, this is where we're going to do our work. But looking at where that rainwater is taking, your sandings or your ablative paint and things like that, asking the marina that you frequent, what are they doing that's implementing best practices to make sure that isn't going in the river? Because it's not necessarily our job to do that, but it is our job to ask. And, having more and more folks and customers ask that of, the marina owners, that market pressure is a lot more effective in a lot of times than me as the Riverkeeper coming as the enforcer saying, now, what are you doing? So that can be helpful.
Great. And it looks like we have one last comment from Mickey Lawler asking if you've noticed if there's been more passenger for hire vessels on the Chester that you suspect are not operating legally, meaning they're just going out and with uncredentialed captains and just operating for money, but not credentialed. Have you noticed anything?
No, the Chester River is a pretty sleepy river, which is one of the reasons I love it so much. So there's really only a few boats that operate with a license, and one of those people is my husband. So I have a pretty good tie on him to make sure he's doing the right thing. And then there's just a couple other boats right out of Chestertown. And then of course there are some for hire boats out of Rock Hall and Kent Island that are doing like head fishing and things like that. But I've never seen an instance where or suspected an instance where it's not a credentialed captain. I mean, the bigger concern is just people that are out there that, may or may not even have undergone the boater safety course. That's who I'm more concerned about. And I mean, even myself, I have a 28-foot whaler is my boat for river keeping. and it's got a 250 horsepower, and I go 3 miles an hour in it, which is a lot more than 6 knots, which is what I've been doing the rest of my life. So I really find that I have to pay a lot more attention to the charts on the Chester River, because I don't want to hit that sneaky mud flat. It's at 30 miles an hour instead of 6. But yeah, I don't notice too many people breaking the law or operating unlicensed. Unfortunately, Dickie Manning, who owns those pound nets, probably suffers the worst consequences, because a lot of boaters at night just run down his weir stakes. So he has lots of lights to try and ward them off, but it's not very successful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I don't know if there's any last questions out there.
Yes. Yes. One from Hans.
Yeah.
Annie, you have mentioned a number of operators on the Chester River out of Rock Hall. You have not mentioned the sailing school operating out of Langford Bay Marina. I can assure you they are operating under best practices. They have all licensed captains. And in that marina, we used to have these, I'm looking for the proper word, but these little oyster baskets that you put down, and I haven't seen them in a while. And the marina is now under a new ownership, an excellent owner. And if that is a location where some of these baskets should be hung, I wouldn't be surprised if the owner would be amenable.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, I love Langford Bay Marina, and I know some of the captains who work out of that sailing school. It is a wonderful sailing school.
Good.
So I hadn't thought about approaching them for some Grow Oysters programming. So I should. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Annie. I think we all thoroughly enjoyed your presentation and inspired to make some better choices in our respective marinas and our time on the water.
Thank you all so much for having me. This was a pleasure. Always happy to spend the evening with fellow captains and talk about what the best thing to do is, which is get out on the water.
Well, we hope you'll join us too and be a part of our group.
That would be great. That would be great.
All right.
Yeah, Annie. Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to turn it over to you, Felder.
Okay, Annie, I mean, this is I think everybody will agree, one of the best presentations we've seen thus far. We could probably go on and on for about another hour in terms of your experiences, what you've seen, and just talking about everything that's been going on, and really appreciate you taking your time out from all of your adventures to talk to us this evening. In appreciation for that, and again, I didn't bring one. I don't know if anybody else has one. You will be getting from us the world famous CAPCA mug, custom made by Tiffany, and will be hand delivered by armored truck to the address that you give us.
Okay.
But you can give it to Yvonne, and then I'll make sure that you get one. It's a beautiful mug, and also you'll be getting a nice thank you letter.
Thank you.
This I have been recording this all evening. Hopefully I did it right, because at one point it said I was signed out, but I think I got it. So it will be posted on our YouTube channel, the CAPCA YouTube channel, so everybody can be able to see it. If we have any problems, I would like to get a copy of your presentation from you, if possible.
Great, no problem.
A lot of what you talked about on Eastern Shore, I'd like to see implemented over here. And I will be contacting Potomac Riverkeepers and see what they're up to, if they can live up to your reputation. And but yes, again, thank you very much.
Oh yeah, the pleasure was mine. Thank you all.
Okay. And in closing, I would like to say, number one, this is the season, as I think a lot of you may know, for the Emmy Awards and the Tony Awards and so on. CAPCA has been honored by receiving the Best of Annapolis 2021 awards as a membership organization. We will make sure that everybody will know what that award looks like. We'll get it posted on the website and in the log. I consider it an honor, and I'd like to thank everybody that had a hand in keeping this organization going over the last, what's it, 18 months now, I think it is.
Yeah,
About when we went virtual.
going on 19.
Yeah, so, but thank you all. And I think, what will be going out, the survey that went out, as we mentioned earlier, would be to make a decision whether or not we are going to meet live in November for our annual general membership meeting, whereby we elect officers. We don't have to, we can do it virtually. We're working on electronic voting. For that reason, we do have a nominating committee that will be putting together a slate of nominees. My biggest concern, even though the Elks Lodge where we meet says that has put together a program for us, there are a lot of this particular lodge, there are a lot of older members. The room that we normally meet in, we generally get about this many people. Well, at a height, we had about 26 people online here this evening, and that's about what we get. At the lodge, maybe a little bit more.
That's what
But
we
I'm just
need for a
concerned about,
quorum.
I'm sorry?
That's what we need for a quorum. We need
Yeah.
27 people to either vote or be in attendance for a valid vote. So it's,
Right,
however, we're going to have a meeting in order to have a valid vote, whether it's online or in person. And
Yeah.
that's what the questionnaire is for. I'm sending it again tomorrow morning. And if you've already filled it out, don't fill it out again. But if you haven't filled it out, please fill it out. That's
Yeah.
very important.
because this way, by doing it, in my opinion, two things. By doing it this way, we eliminate the possibility of anybody either coming in and spreading something or catching something from somebody that has been vaccinated, or the Delta variant, or the Mu, or the Lambda, whatever it is that's going around now. Or Maryland changing their minds and doing a mandate and shutting down stuff again, depending on what it is, because we're talking about November. This is just the end of September. Plus, the other thing is we get more members being able to vote by doing it electronically and then presenting the results here. So we should definitely be able to get a quorum in that respect. So I see that we are losing a few people. So with that, I think we will adjourn. And thank you all for showing up again. Annie, thank you. You have no idea how good this was. And thank you. See you all next month.